Hey everyone, welcome back to the Engineered Angler. Today we're going to make another lure, another wake bait to be exact. But this is a little different. I have a friend of mine who's a captain and he does some guiding out in the Gulf of Mexico for flats fishing mostly. And he's been hinting around for a couple of years that I should maybe design a wake bait for redfish. I'm not really sure how effective that's going to be, but he seems to think that it would be a good lure to have. So that's what we're going to make today. And in my mind, I want a lure that's not too big, but not really a small lure. I want it to have a little bit of a flat side to it because I want to paint it gold. I want it to have a nice flash as it's going through the water, and those flat sides tend to give a lot of flash. And I also want a rattle in it. So we're going to base this lure on a lure I have already made. Now this one is designed, as you can tell by that long bib, for deep water. And it has a nice action both running fast and even running kind of slowly. And while you can actually hear the rattle while it's running underwater, it's really kind of dull. The sound is a little bit muted. I want a kind of a crisper sound, so I'm going to put a different kind of rattle chamber in the one we're going to make today. So if you're interested in it, stick around. So here's the essential shape. This is more or less the shape of that lure I just showed you. And the big difference is going to be the rattle for one thing, but mostly it's going to be that dive bib, where right now it comes off at about a 40-degree angle and goes quite a long way. For this one, I need it to go almost straight down. Not quite at a 90-degree to that center line, but close. Something along those lines right there. So we're going to go with this slightly off 90 angle, and we are going to put our tie-on eye right at the base. So that probably means drilling through the bib itself. But that's okay. We can do that. All right, so this is my original drawing. While I could have followed my own instructions on how to draw this and repeat this drawing, all I did was put it under here and then just place the compass where I could see my old compass marks on the old drawing and just draw in the new curves. It was super easy. It took me like 3 minutes. But what's going to be new is this really big rattle chamber that I'm putting closer to the center of the lure than the old one. It's going to be bigger. It should be louder. And hopefully I can maintain the balance of the lure. Now I need to go ahead and draw in the bib slot. And I've taken this little T-square and just taken it off about 5 degrees off of perpendicular. And I'm going to draw in the center line here, so I can draw in my bib slot. And I'm just going to align this part of it with my center line. And that looks about right to me. So now we need to consider the material we're going to make it out of and the steps we're going to take to actually get this thing cut out in a way that allows me to get a chamber in there and get the lip slot and all that done really accurately. So I've got this piece of camphor that's going to work out really nice. Camphor is a relatively light, low density wood. It's easy to carve and easy to cut, and it sands really nicely. And though it smells really strong because those camphor oils come out when you sand it, I still enjoy using it to make lures. So on this build, I'm going to be a little more careful about how much weight I put in the lure, since I'm putting weight in as a rattle, and it's a little harder to control. So I've cut out a small little section of this piece of wood, and I've taken measurements of this dimension, 5 of them, because it tends to taper a little bit. Taken 2 length measurements and 2 thickness measurements in the narrow side. And I've used all those measurements to calculate the volume. And the volume is 6.316 centimeters cubed. And I'm doing all this to get the density of the wood so that I can then calculate how much weight I can actually put in this thing before it starts to sink. And I don't want it to sink. So the next step is to weigh it. So the weight is 2.22. I'll write that down. So now I can calculate the density by taking the weight, 2.22, and dividing the volume into it. So the density is 0.351 grams per cubic centimeter. All right, before I actually go over to the saw and start cutting this out, I really want to take advantage of the fact that I've got some relatively square sides and I can drill pilot holes. And I'm using a 1/16 inch bit. Now we can start cutting. All right, by placing the blank in the vise so that the little lines for the bib slot are vertical, I don't have to worry about what angle to cut. I can just cut straight up and down. And you can just eyeball that, or you can get real fussy and put a little draftsman's triangle here. And then it's just a matter of tightening it up and getting it cut. And to help me align my blade, I'm just going to draw a line square across. And then we'll start our cut straight down. All right, now I'm going to widen it with this broken hacksaw blade glued together for extra thickness. That looks about right. So now I need to drill out the rattle chamber, and that actually ends up being two different size bores, a 3/4 inch Forstner bit and a 7/8 inch Forstner bit. The larger one is really there to set a little bit of a lip so that I can put a plate to cover the chamber up, and then the 3/4 inch one is going to go all the way through. I'm drilling to a depth that I think will work. It really is going to depend on how I end up shaping it. My intention is to try to keep this section as flat as possible. We'll see how well that works. It's likely going to be a very chubby lure right in the middle. All right, so we've got our hole and we've got our lip. Now it's a matter of shaping this thing. All right, so before I actually start shaping this, I need to have a contour, at least an idea of my contour. And I know I don't want to take off very much right here, but I want to come in to a blunt point at the front and an even more blunt point at the back. There's going to be a lot of adjustment by eye. That's why I don't care that I'm drawing with this giant carpenter's pencil. Just trying to get an indication of where I should start tapering down. I'm going to go with that for now, and I'm going to do the shaping on the belt sander. pretty happy with the way it's coming out. Got some pretty good symmetry going in there. And I'm able to round it off quite a bit without affecting this flat spot, which was kind of important to me. I still got a long way to go to get it to look really nice. All right, I'm gonna go back to sanding this thing by hand, and I'll get back to you when I got it close to where I want it to be. It's kind of nice to have a hole in it to hold on to. Note to self, drill a hole in everything. All right, I've got to say I'm pretty happy with the way the shape has turned out. It's got some nice symmetry. A pretty cool shape, but the next step is to give it the first coat of UV resin. But before we do that, we actually have to calculate how much weight we're allowed to put in this. So I need to gather up the hooks I want to put on it, the hook eyes and the tie-on eye, and the plates I'm going to use to cover this hole. And then we can weigh it all and figure out how many BBs I can put in this thing. And now we weigh the body all by itself after it's been sanded and shaped. And the weight of the body is 6.74 grams. So now we just need to figure out what the volume of the body is. And we do that by dividing the density into the weight. So 6.74 divided by 0.351, 19.2 cubic centimeters. And so some of you are probably wondering, how are you accounting for the hole? Well, that's a little more complex. All I'm doing really is measuring the depth of the hole and the diameter. I'll solve for that volume and I'll add that to the total volume. All right, so the calculation is pretty simple. All you gotta do is calculate the area of the opening times the depth of that hole, and the area is half the diameter squared, which is here, times pi. And then multiply it times the depth and I get 5 centimeters cubed. And I add that to the 19.2 that I already had, so that's 24.2 cubic centimeters. And that means that's the amount of water this lure will displace when it hits the water. And because water weighs 1 gram per cubic centimeter, this lure has to weigh, complete weight, around 24 grams to just begin to sink. First thing I want to do is find out what everything weighs that I've got to put in it. And the caps for that chamber for the rattle, we need to make those caps. So how about we use an old tuna can? That's got it. Now I just need to do one for the other side. All right, so really the only bit of hardware left is the tie-on eyes that I'm going to make with this stainless steel leader wire. It's a 174-pound test and about 0.73 millimeters in diameter. First I take about a 4-inch piece and I wrap it around my jeweler's pliers using these safety wire pliers. And these are meant to twist safety wires on hardware. And I just use these to make my twist. And I just need to have 3 of these. I've got the 2 plates in the lure, and I've got the 2 hooks I'm going to use and the split rings. So let's go ahead and weigh these out. I almost forgot the bib. So we got 11.13. So that means we got about 13 grams that we can add to it. Now I don't know that we want to add 13 whole grams because that'll make it start to sink. But typically what I do on a lure that I want to float, like a wake bait like this one, I'll put about 1/4 of the maximum weight, and that's about 3 1/4 grams, but actually I want to bump it up just a little more. I want to put in about 4 grams, and I'm going to do all of that in BBs. So I'm looking for a total weight of about 15 grams, and I've got 17. So, all right, so what I did was I took out one of the big BBs, one of the big pellets, and a couple of the small BBs, and that gets me right to where I want to be, right about 15.5. That'll do. All All right, and the way I plan to close this thing up and lock the little plate in is I'm going to put a few drops of crazy glue, and then I'll spritz it with some baking soda. And that should create a little bit of a fillet in there that'll protect from the thing cracking later on as it's rattling. That should be nicely sealed. And we got a heck of a rattle. Now to fill that up, I'm going to fill it with 2-part resin because the mixture I use has a very similar density to the wood. Time to drill the holes for the twist eyes. And the idea is to have it just a little bit bulbous, just sticking up just a little bit, and that way I can sand that down. So this should take about 10 minutes to set hard enough for me to flip it over, and then we'll pour the other side. I've got to make a choice of what kind of chrome finish I want to use on this. Between the 3 chroming products I have some of the Spaz Stix still left over, some of the Marlowe liquid chrome in sort of a filler pen. I can spray that on. And I also have the Krylon looking glass. And none of these are absolutely bulletproof or give you a perfect finish, but they do give you a pretty good chrome-like finish that I can then turn gold with a little bit of transparent orangey yellow. I've had good success with all of them, and I've also had some pretty good failures with all of them. So what do you guys recommend? Which one would you use? Let me know in the comments, and we'll see which one I select. All right, I've got it sanded down. Next step I'm going to do is put in the hook eyes and the tie-on eye. All right, let's put the tail end one in first. Then the belly eye. All right, and now the more difficult one. First, I'll get some in there, and I'll get as much of it pumped into it as possible, and then we'll get this thing aligned. And now make sure that that bib is nice and straight. All right, that looks pretty good. I got a mess on my hands, but everything else looks pretty clean. All right, this for sure is going to take another 15 minutes or 20 minutes before I can handle it too much. And then I'm going to set that bib a little better with some UV resin, and that'll get us to the point where we can start to put a clear coat on it. But first, this epoxy has to set, and then we'll get to it. So as you can see through the window, it's gotten dark on me. So we're gonna have to call it a day, and I'll get back to it tomorrow. If you like this stuff, you don't have to smash the like button. You can just touch it lightly and it does the same thing. So I would appreciate it if you could give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. And hopefully this thing turns out to be a real redfish magnet. All right, I've got it sanded down after that first clear coat. The next step is to paint it black. Testor's opaque black. get a nice thick coat of this stuff on here. All right, this thing should be nice and shiny, I hope. So check it out. So the idea is to have a super glossy finish and really glassy, smooth surface. I'm happy with that. The next step is to put on the chrome spray that I've decided to use. And I'm gonna go ahead and use Spaz Stix. And the reason I'm using Spaz Stix is that I'm just more practiced with it. I just feel more confident with it. This is the Spaz Stix Ultimate Mirror Chrome. Whew, that's a lot. All right, now we let it dry for about 15 minutes and then I'll buff off the little bit of overspray that's on there, and hopefully it'll look a lot better than this. All right, that's not too bad. Definitely see my fingers in there. Okay, so now I'm gonna turn it gold, and I might put some very light green scales at the very top. We'll see how it looks. All right, I'm gonna start off with the Ghost Tint Yellow. All right, I've put a really fine mesh on here, and I'm gonna paint with this transparent green. All right, let's see how that came out. Just the slightest little bit of scale. And now I'm gonna paint black on top. I'm gonna lay it on a little dark right here and then just have it sort of ghost out. And of course you can't finish a lure without a little bit of red right there. And we'll use some pearl red for that. Should I put a strike eye on it? Looks kind of plain without a strike eye. All right, let's put some eyes on this thing. All right, what do you think? Red or silver? Man, that red looked good. I don't know. I can't choose. I'm gonna go with the red. After putting a clear coat of polyacrylic on there as a mid coat, I'm putting on the final UV resin clear coat. All right, it's in the chamber. I'm gonna let it rotate so it levels out really nicely, gets nice and glossy. And when it's set, we'll head down to the lake and we'll give this thing a try. Maybe get some underwater shots. Here it is, listen to this. Man, I could be in a mariachi band with this thing. What a rattle. All right, let's just throw it in the lake and we'll get out in the lake and try to get some underwater shots. It's got a real good action. It stays right up on top. All right, let's take this thing out on the boat. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying these kind of lure builds, let me know. I'll see you next Friday.